Welcome, Final Fam. Let's talk about the three horsemen of terror, also known to me as the Unholy Trinity: Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, and of course, Freddy Krueger. Today I'm going to be diving deep into some of their films and talking about what I liked about the particular films. I definitely want you to comment below and let me know what you thought of the franchises and what your favorite movies are. Let's talk about my number one booski, Michael Myers. Now, I'm not particularly happy with how the franchise went. The later movies with Jamie Lee Curtis reprising her role, I was super excited for Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. However, I was a bit let down. Halloween Ends was definitely better than Halloween Kills, but I'll get into that later on. But let's talk about the conception of Halloween and how that went. Now, John Carpenter did a hell of a job with Halloween, introducing that whole vibe. And I remember when I first saw this movie, I was terrified. And later on, I started babysitting, and I was even more terrified being in that particular position as a babysitter, watching the kids, and there could be some crazy psycho on the loose. Of course, that's my imagination, but it did strike fear in the hearts of many people. Now, Halloween came out in 1978. That's actually the year I was born, so that was a good year. Anyway, it's a horror thriller starring Jamie Lee Curtis, #1 Scream Queen. And Jamie Lee is Laurie Strode in this movie. And basically, she's going about her life. She's a student and she's being stalked by her serial killer brother, Michael Myers. So Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital in order to take out his sister, Laurie Strode. And she's babysitting that night and he comes in and all hell breaks loose. Now, I really enjoyed this film because it was the intimacy of them being in the home. Michael makes very improvised skrills and he's able to take people down. It's horror at its core and it's horror at its best. And this is #1 for a slasher movie, in my opinion, because it's up close and intimate. And it seems like Michael can never die. He keeps coming back. He keeps coming back. And he pops up in the craziest places after you've ran so far and gotten away. He's right there. And that's what makes it so scary and intense. I really enjoyed Dr. Sam Loomis's character played by Donald Pleasance. He was a very good actor, very talented. And his eyes told so much about the story and so much about the fear and concern for Laurie. Then you have Halloween 2, where Laurie is in the hospital because of the vicious attack from Michael. And she's still being stalked by him. Poor Laurie is all busted up and the saga continues. She's still hopping away and trying to escape Michael. And I enjoyed part 2 because it was a smooth continuation from part 1 and it gave you, more interesting information about Michael, his relentlessness to attack his sister, and it was just well done. And then you had Halloween 3, which had nothing to do with the Halloween franchise at all. It was Season of the Witch, and it was pretty enjoyable, so we'll scratch that one. Then you had Halloween 4, which is the return of Michael Myers, and I thought that it carried on the same momentum as the previous movies. This one didn't star Jamie Lee Curtis, however, it starred Danielle Harris, and she has just exploded on the scene in the horror genre, and we love her. We love a good Scream Queen. And she was a kid in this movie and Michael Myers was stalking her because that's his niece. Then in 1998, H2O was released. So this is Halloween 20 years later. Jamie Lee Curtis reprises her role as Laurie Strode. And we were super excited as horror fans. As a horror fan, I was super excited to see this because it's 20 years later and your brother is still after you. And we thought everything died down and it just starts up. I really love the location. It was filmed at a school. It was very creepy. And Michael Myers is now stalking the grown Laurie Strode and her family. And I thought that was nicely done. I really enjoyed H2O. It was a wonderful continuation and bringing the franchise to light, bringing it into the future, which I thought was pretty cool. I did enjoy Halloween Resurrection with Busta Rhymes and Tyra Banks and a couple of other actors. I enjoyed it. Call me crazy, but I like they brought it into the future and it was streamed. That's what at the time, that's what we were doing, streaming a lot of stuff. So imagine if you streamed a killer, like that's insane. And you got to see it, that POV, and I thought that was an interesting spin on the franchise. So, and then you had the remakes. Now, I particularly liked the Rob Zombie remake for Halloween. I loved it because he dove into Michael Myers as the person. We got to see exactly why he became the monster that he became, why he became a Skriller, and we also got to see the dynamic of his family, like how messed up they were as people and why he was the way he was. So the behavior, the mental illness, all of that stuff was in the Rob Zombie movie, which I appreciated. It was super gory and I enjoyed it. Not many people were a fan of the Rob Zombie movie, but I just like his taste and stuff. I think he does different things, and he brings a different type of feel to these horror movies, which I enjoyed. And of course was the second movie, the sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween, and I enjoyed that one as well. I loved all of the movies up until that point, and then there came other remakes and they weren't so great, and then they started to get a little weird. When I saw Halloween Kills, I was so disappointed when I left the theater, because I'm like, who wrote this? Why was it like this? And many people would tend to disagree, but as a horror writer, you are watching the movie with not only just watching for enjoyment, you're also looking and listening to the script. Like, how does everything play out? And the term "evil dies tonight" was repeated so many times, it lost its effect, and it made the movie essentially cheesy to me. And there were scenes that were inconsistent. I don't want to ruin it for you, so I'm not going to jump into spoilers, but if you've watched Halloween Kills, then I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. Out of 10, I would give it a 5. A 5, I think, is a solid number for that one, because it could have been so much better. And I think I had high hopes for this one, because it was so cool to see Jamie Lee Curtis reprise her role as Laurie Strode, and to do it, in such a fashion where she's an older, lady this time, and she's taking on Michael, and we really wanted to see that, we wanted to see that showdown, and it really let us down, because we thought we were going to see way more than what we got. So, at least what I got. So I was kind of disappointed in it. And then Halloween Ends was better than Halloween Kills. And the sad thing, when I think about Halloween Kills, I think about the gay couple that was in there, Big John and Little John. They were the only people that I remembered from the movie. Like, there were people in the movie that made the dumbest decisions. You're like, why would you do this? I know that horror movies are supposed to be, supposed to have characters that make mistakes, but to make grave mistakes like they made, and to make these foolish decisions, it was just, it didn't make any sense to me. And then when I saw Halloween Ends, yes, it wrapped things up, but at the same time, it wasn't as theatrical that I would have liked, but it was, to me, it was okay. It was okay. And I think out of 10, I'd probably give it a 7. A solid 7, I think, works. The Halloween franchise, I've been a fan of it since I was a little kid. So I think growing up with that, I'm in my 40s now, and I think growing up with that movie, it's just really cool to know that you saw something as a child, and then it keeps getting, revamped, revisited, and reprised. And I don't mind remakes, but if you do a remake, do it well. That's all I ask. So that's it for the Halloween franchise. So now we're moving on to talk about Friday the 13th. Now, Jason Voorhees creeped me out, because I went to summer camp. I was one of those summer camp kids, so we had sleepaway camp, and it was pretty fun. However, Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th, gave me nightmares. It really did, and it creeped me out, because there's something creepy about the woods. There's something creepy about the woods. It's a wooded area, there are trees and stuff, and you don't know what's hiding in there. So it very well could be a serial killer. So Jason Voorhees, to me, when I first saw Friday the 13th, I remember that thrill as a kid, like watching this, and the hockey mask. Something about that hockey mask was just freakish enough. So I really enjoyed the movies. I don't think I've missed any of them. I've seen all of them, even where the one where Jason was in space. I can't even remember the name of that one. Oh, Jason X. I've seen that one too, and I enjoyed it. It was kind of quirky, kind of wacky, but I enjoyed it. Those movies to me brought this like nostalgic feel, and all of the movies, like the Unholy Trinity, all of them bring that nostalgic feel where you're watching the movies and they draw you in, because the characters are written crazy and people make dumb decisions, but it's a fun watch. It's like one of those, it's kind of like a horror comedy in a way. You get the gore, you get the laughs, you get the characters making stupid decisions, and it was fun. So I really enjoyed them. So Friday the 13th started with Jason Voorhees. He was a child at the time at the summer camp while the camp counselors were off making love. Sadly, he drowned. And the movie, now, if you haven't seen this, there are spoilers. I hope you've seen it. But the movie, you are really thinking that he is the one that's the killer, when the whole time, in actuality, it's his mom. That was shocking to the audience when you saw that in that big reveal. So Mrs. Voorhees, that was insane. I thought that was nicely done. It was brilliant, because it gave you these breadcrumbs. You're thinking that he's doing this particular thing, but in actuality, it's his mom. getting revenge for his death, and I thought that that was really neat. The other movies that followed Jason Voorhees, of course, his mom is killed, so now he's out for revenge. So you have part one with Jason's mom doing the killings. Then you have part two where Jason is grown and he takes revenge for his mother's death and he goes after everybody. Then you have part three that's a continuation of part two. Jenny Fields, that character, she learns self-defense and she survives and she goes back to take out Jason Voorhees, which is probably not a good idea, but that's what we saw in part three, and it was okay. I like part three, it was cool. Then you had Friday the 13th, the final chapter with Corey Feldman, and I enjoyed this one. I really thought it was the end of Jason Voorhees, and I thought it was the end of the franchise, which I heard that it was, but it got revamped. So we got Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, and that started the franchise, or reset the clock on the franchise. And since we all were familiar with who Jason Voorhees is, it was just a continuation of this serial killer story. Then after that was Jason Lives, The New Blood, and Jason Takes on Manhattan. I enjoyed all of those. It was neat to change the environment. Jason's out of the woods, especially for the Manhattan one, and he's in New York. The song by Frank Sinatra, that actually creeped me out because it was in the movie. So yeah, it was decent for what it was, and they tried to put a fresh spin. Even though it was a character that we've seen in the woods, they tried to change the environment, they tried to change the storyline, but they kept the heart of the matter the same. Then you had Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, and again, I thought that was the end of the franchise, but we got to see Jason pretty much getting sucked into hell and at the end of the movie, and I thought that was cool. It was a nice wrap up for everything. And then it got reborn, and then we got introduced to Jason X, where Jason is in outer space. It's like, what else can you possibly do with Jason Voorhees now? He's in space. He is in space. Then, of course, in 2003, fans wanted to see Jason and Freddy go toe-to-toe. And I thought that was interesting because I'll be talking about Freddy in just a bit, but fans wanted to see that, and we got it. We got a Freddy versus Jason, which was a decent movie. It was funny. It was nicely done, and that was a nice bow put on the franchise. And then lastly, of course, in 2009, we got the movie with Jared Padalecki and Danielle Panabaker, Friday the 13th, the remake. And that one was okay. And I love Jared, of course, from Supernatural. And that one was okay. I didn't find it so, I wasn't so taken with it. And to me, it was okay. But it wasn't as scary to me for some reason. It did capture some of that nostalgia. However, to me, I wasn't a complete fan of it. And lastly, rounding out the Unholy Trinity is Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street. When I saw this movie, I was shook. I was rattled. I could not sleep because this is a supernatural being that goes into your dreams. So the whole thing is, don't fall asleep. And as a kid, when I snuck downstairs to watch this, I snuck downstairs for a lot of these horror movies, and then after I had to go to bed. I did not sleep that night and I had to go to school. It was terrible. But A Nightmare on Elm Street was interesting. We had never seen a killer like this before. Somebody who had knives for fingers, and someone who can pull you, that can come into your dream and kill you. And I was just like, that's insane. So A Nightmare on Elm Street has a special place in my heart, and we're going to talk about some of the movies and what I liked about the franchise. So in 1984, Wes Craven came on the scene with A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was phenomenal. It starred Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, and Johnny Depp. It was good. Like, it was a teen slasher movie at best, and to have this antagonist that can go into your dreams was insane. I really like the entire premise, and I like the feel of the movie, and it focused on high schoolers, which I thought was pretty interesting. And Johnny Depp in this movie made his debut for film, and I was just like, who is this guy? He is adorable. So he was the eye candy. Sadly, poor Johnny did not make it in this one. But that scene itself, I think, stays with me to this day, where he was watching TV and Freddy pulls him through the bed because he fell asleep. That, to me, is etched in my brain because it was like blood on the ceiling. It was everywhere. It was super gory. And at that time, of course, I look at it now and I'm like, whatever. But at that time, I think my jaw fell on the floor watching that particular scene. So the movie's plot or premise is that Tina Gray, she is a friend of Nancy Thompson. She goes to sleep one night and has this nightmare about this man with knives for fingers. All of the kids in the neighborhood are starting to have these similar dreams. Sadly, Tina's character is taken out, and Nancy, her friend, is trying to figure out what is happening and what is causing these nightmares. Nancy sees Freddy in her dreams, and Nancy develops a plan to pull Freddy out of her nightmare and take him out. And I like that this movie is done with practical effects like Halloween and Friday the 13th. Back then they didn't have the CGI effects that we have today. For them to use practical movie effects like with pulleys and latex, it was pretty interesting to see. So you have Nancy, and she's the protagonist of the story, and she is going at it. Like, she is so brave, and I really enjoyed Nancy's character in this movie because for her to be going through so much stuff, she's still scared, but she is trying to face her demons, essentially. So Nightmare on Elm Street did not have as many movies as Halloween, but it did have quite a few, and A Nightmare on Elm Street was great. Part 2 was good. Part 2 was Freddy's Revenge, and it was about a kid who moved into Nancy's house, and I like how they did it, the transition, because Nancy didn't reprise her role. However, they had another character come in, Jesse, and Jesse was living in Nancy's home, so it only made sense for you know, to be living in the Freddy Krueger house. So it made total sense for that to be happening. And then they had A Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors, which I thought was cool because not only are they fighting, and Freddy was found out to be like a sleep demon. So not only are they understanding how to dream, but how to be warriors in their dream and protect themselves. So I thought that that was a neat way to be able to combat this, Freddy Krueger and to stop him from harming other people. Then they had Dream Master, which I thought was pretty good because it had special effects in it. Freddy's very vocal. He's a funny character, whereas you have, you know, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, who are silent killers. But Freddy is pretty funny. He says whatever's on his mind, and he has punchlines and hella jokes. So I enjoyed Freddy just for that. Then it was followed by Dream Child, that creepy little kid in there. It was interesting to show a character who was pregnant and had the baby dreaming, because you wonder about that. And can your baby actually dream? And then to have Freddy, you know, attach itself to the child's dreams, it was crazy. I liked how that was done, and the script was written for that one. Then you had Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare, and they tried to introduce like a video game sequence, which I thought was neat. It was nostalgic, was decent too. Freddy, of course, shows up there and wreaks havoc on these kids because they're dreaming, of course. But that one was cool. It wasn't my favorite from the franchise. It was just okay for me. But Wes later on developed Wes Craven's A New Nightmare, and I thought that that one was good. It was nice to see Nancy reprise her role, or Heather Langenkamp reprise her role as Nancy Thompson. So it was interesting to see, and it brought Freddy into the future. It was kind of like a refresh, like H2O did for Halloween. And I enjoyed it. That was pretty decent. And of course, Freddy versus Jason, because it is a crossover, so they're both under that franchise. And then rounding it out, we had the final remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and that one was okay. It was okay because it showed more about who Freddy Krueger was. And I think with these remakes, what they tend to do is dive into the character to find out exactly why they were the way they were. And the Nightmare on Elm Street remake was very creepy to me. It wasn't funny like Freddy at all. He wasn't funny in the movie at all. He was darker. It carried a different tone. You could clearly see the pedo vibes there, and you can clearly see that this Freddy was much different, I think, from the other Freddy. He was more serious and focused. It was more about the thrill of the kill, not the actual, you know, fun of it. So yeah, that one's a little darker, and to me it was okay. I thought it could have been a lot better. Out of 10, I would probably give it like a solid 5. But that's the wrap for the Unholy Trinity, and this is more of a deep dive into some of the movies, the franchise, what I liked about it. But I definitely want you to let me know in the comment section. I definitely want to hear what movies were your favorites in the franchises and why. And let me know what you thought about this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.